Hey guys, Trevor here, coming at you with another video. This video is about motor out awareness and motor out risk. The sport of paramotoring is all about understanding the risk that you're taking and minimizing that risk as much as possible. We're all guilty of taking high risk. We're all guilty of doing silly things. It's okay to do silly things as long as you understand what you're doing and the risk that you're exposing yourself to. I try to take a very realistic approach to things like this. We're not all going to be perfect, and we can't expect to be. But what we can do is work hard to understand all of the risk points and the ways to reduce that risk. So in today's video, I want to talk about motor outs. Our small two-stroke engines, unlike general aviation, are prone to having motor outs. These can happen for a variety of reasons like spark plugs backing themselves out, running out of fuel, or a bunch of other reasons. These are preventable to a certain degree, but unpredictable to a certain degree. So as pilots, it's best that at all times during flying, we're constantly thinking about what we would do if our motor died right then. My general rule is that at all times during the flight, I have a location determined in my mind that I'm going to land. Some of the little things that you can do to reduce this motor out risk is not flying low downwind, not flying over locations or obstacles that you don't want to land in, like water or trees and stuff like that. So let's talk about some of those risk points and how we can reduce those risks. The first one and most obvious one is flying low over water or over water far enough that you would not make it back to shore. Water is risky for us paramotor pilots because although our paramotors can float for a short time or you can swim well, there's just a lot of stuff going on. You go into cold water, you enter into shock, there's a lot going on, and you may or may not be able to get out, swim to shore safely. By staying slightly closer to shore or flying in a way where if your motor died, you could glide or flare into the shoreline or shallow water, you reduce the risk of the water landings. Personally, if I'm going to foot drag water, you'll see I always do it right along the shoreline where I could flare my way onto shore or land in very, very shallow water. Although shallow water is significantly more risky than right next to the water. So I try to always fly in a way that if the motor dies, I'm not going to be landing in water or landing in the shallowest water possible. So now let's talk about the next example, which is a sea of trees, as I call it. Landing in tall trees, especially 50-foot plus tall trees, can be very dangerous. You can get stuck in those trees and then be hanging there for who knows how long, and or getting impaled by a tree branch, which would be no fun. It is best that we try to avoid flying over a sea of trees and always have a glide to a better landing spot. Now, this isn't always possible, but it is best to try and gain as much altitude when clearing a gap of trees. That way you can make from one spot to another spot. This is one of those silly little things that you spend 2 extra minutes climbing and you reduce and avoid that risk. As a paramotor pilot, it is best to try and reduce that risk as much as possible. Moving on to other things is locations where having a motor out would lead to long extraction or difficult extraction from that location. Example, I recently flew down this waterfall, and although it was one of the coolest moments of my flying career, the risk of a motor out was extremely high. Had I had a motor out, not only would I be landing either in really tall, uneven rocks, or I'd be landing in some water, which is equally not as fun. However, let's say I landed safely. The additional risk to this location was extracting myself or getting myself out of there. Who knows how I would have gotten myself out of there, how long it would have taken for me to get myself out of there, and if I could have gotten the equipment out of there. Let alone if I had landed in a weird way where I rolled my ankle and can't walk. For me, it's just about having these conversations and thinking about things. Now let's move on to the next possible situation, which is landing in mountainous areas or locations with long walks out. Let's say you fly up a really beautiful mountain and you have just an incredible flight and you run out of fuel and have to land 5 miles by hiking to the nearest road. Although the perception of that is not very dangerous, the reality of that could be far more dangerous than you think. Say you land closer to sunset and you have to do that hike during the night. That could lead to you getting lost or having to spend the night somewhere else. This is just risk that you have to understand and accept. As a paramotor pilot, I like to have these conversations with people to just bring things to mind. There's a lot of ways we can reduce risk in all aspects. First off, we can fly at higher altitudes to give us better glide to safer landing spots. Second thing is we can bring supplies that'll reduce the risk of us having to spend the night in locations that are undesirable. And the third thing is we can fly with safety devices like a Garmin InReach Mini 2 that would signal for help to people if we happen to get in trouble. Pro tip, you want that Garmin to be reachable even if you're not able to move. Having it in a chest location or close to your arms is best, just in case you end up in a situation where you can't reach it. This is just a conversation around risk and how you minimize this risk. Motor outs are something we are all going to experience at some point. It is not a question of if, it is a question of when. And it's a question of what that looks like when it does happen. Personally, I think I've had only 2 motor outs in my entire flying career of 11 years. The first one was on my second flight, and I was able to bring it in and land safely at the LZ. The second one, I was flying over a lake, and I was able to glide it back and land feet from shore. Thankfully, I haven't had any close calls with motor outs, but it is possible, and recently I've found myself flying in situations where a motor out would be extremely risky. These are preventable and reducible risk points. We can reduce our risk of motor outs by flying in a way where a motor out wouldn't be a big deal. Now, I like to take a realistic approach to this and understand that at times we're going to ignore or overlook motor out risk. It's something I just want to bring to your attention and have floating around in the back of your mind. Always be thinking about it. Always keep it in the back of your mind. You are not, let me say one more time, you are not invincible. You will not get away with not having a motor out. At some point, you will, in fact, have one. It's going to happen to all of us. My name is Trevor Steele. Thank you guys for watching this video, and I'll see you guys in the next video.